Coming up on Theater Talk.
Creativity takes a lot is a combative sport in some sense. It is one of these things, you just don't have great art without great chaos.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
It was thrilling to learn from the masters, but there was a feeling like that somehow we could be making better films.
Around that time, the studio did a survey that revealed a majority of teenage moviegoers wouldn't be caught dead near a Disney movie. We were just waiting for something, anything to happen.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
In the 1980s and 1990s, the Disney Animation Department was working on all cylinders, creating some classic movies like Roger Rabbit, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. But behind the scenes of those great movies was all sorts of corporate intrigue and backstabbing. That's the subject of a fascinating new documentary.
You're surprised this is his angle?
About the animation department at Disney from 1984 to 1994. The movie is called Waking Sleeping Beauty. It has been put together by our good friend Peter Schneider, who was the president of the animation department at Disney during those years. And one of the backstabbers and intrigue makers himself, Peter Schneider. Welcome to the Theater Talk.
Thank you very much, Michael. I thought that was your role, backstabbing and intrigue.
No, I let you guys do it, and I simply report on it.
Thank you very much.
And joining Peter is our old friend Patrick Pacheco, the theater reporter for the Los Angeles Times. And Patrick has written this movie with Peter. He's leaving journalism to make a lot more money in documentary filmmaking. So,
oh, there's a lot of money to be made in documentary filmmaking, right, Peter?
None.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back to Theater Talk, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right, Peter. You guys were doing some just incredibly creative stuff at the time. But as your movie shows, there was a lot of tension between Michael Eisner, who was then the head of the company, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was
and Roy Disney.
What caused that tension, and from that tension, did this creativity really flow? In other words, do you need that tension to create these great shows?
Well, the movie is really about why did the animation department, which in 1984 had released The Black Cauldron, arguably the worst movie made in the Disney canon, and why did it revitalize itself? Why was there a new golden age? And it took an extraordinary amount of people, including lots of artists, Jeffrey and Michael and Roy and myself and Don Hunt, who's directed this movie, to revitalize the place. Howard Ashman.
The wonderful Howard Ashman.
The extraordinary Howard
Alan
Ashman.
Menken. Yeah.
And creativity takes a lot is a combative sport in some sense. It is one of these things, you just don't have great art without great chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the whole point of the movie. How do you capture creativity? What happens with creativity? Why do you make good things every now and again? And then, of course, you have the intrigue. You do have people, there's a lot of money involved, a lot of egos involved, credits involved. And why does it fall apart? And Patrick really helped us shape this movie by interviewing all the participants.
Yes. Well, one of the extraordinary things about the movie is you have gotten people to speak openly, Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, for the first time about all of that intrigue. How did you convince them, Patrick, to open up?
I think that Don and Peter did the convincing. I just came in with my little tape recorder and played the journalist role here. But I thought that was the fascinating thing about it, because when Peter asked me about 2 years ago to help them, and collaborate with them on this documentary, I thought two things would happen. Number one, I'd be fired and a real writer would come in. And number two, Disney would never let this see the light of day. Right. But in fact, they are. And I think the reason I was brought in, and it shows in the film itself, is that Peter has no rules. And I think that was key to the revival and the Renaissance, that you had people like Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Peter Schneider who had no rules. They didn't care what people had done in the past. They wanted to know what you could do now. And I think the other reason, and Peter can speak more to this than I can, but I think that the reason that people did speak to me and to Dawn and to you is because the temperatures had cooled by this time. People were ready to talk. They wanted to tell the story.
What was the basic nature of this conflict?
Well, It's been well documented after this period of time that Jeffrey left and sued Michael, and Roy tried to get rid of Michael from the company. But during this period of time, it really was fundamentally about credit. Who actually did the work? Can you reward me for doing the work? Jeffrey really felt that he didn't get the respect he deserved for the amount of work that he did, in my opinion. And we documented it in the movie. Yeah. This is not a puff piece. This is not like, gosh, aren't we great?
No, that's what's fascinating. It's not, yo, we did a wonderful job here.
And was his objection valid?
You know, it's a collective. Animation, as is theater, it takes so many people to put on a show. And the question is, who deserves the credit?
Yeah. This sidebar, the thing I loved so much in your movie was seeing all these artists, the grunts, the animators.
There never be grunts, Susan.
Well,
Susan!
But I mean,
cut that! Okay.
No, cut that. But these wonderful cartoonists, that so many artists are there.
How do you take credit?
Yeah.
Who deserves credit? When a movie makes $1 billion in profit, don't I deserve a bit of it? So a lot of it was, first off, when you make Little Mermaid and Rescuers Down Under and Beauty and the Beast, it was all about art. It was about changing the world. And we changed the world. That's our premise in the movie. We changed the world. And the question is, when the money comes in, shouldn't I get a piece of it?
But aren't you all, though, I mean, you're in a corporate structure, and Michael Eisner is the head of Disney. Does he not legitimately get the credit for assembling the team?
Absolutely. I think he gets the credit for that. Roy Disney absolutely gets the credit for saving Disney Animation.
For recognizing that it was something worth saving.
Correct. Yeah. And Jeffrey, I think, gets the credit for actually having the drive to do it, the marketing prowess to do it, the driven excellence to make it great. Everybody does get their credit. The question is, why do all the egos always fall out of line?
And how was the money divided between Eisner and Katzenberg?
Well, the money comes to the company.
I mean, what was the relationship of how much they made?
Well, it's well documented they got paid a lot of money.
No, but, but what I'm saying is...
So did you, Peter. Patrick, I don't know what your deal is.
We're here to talk about art.
No, but I'm saying
we're talking about art.
Because, Michael Eisner, is he making a whole lot more money than Katzenberg? Is that part of the ego conflict?
No, I don't think it was all about money at all.
No, okay.
It was really much more about credit and who did what, and about getting respect. And I think we document that in the movie quite articulately.
Right. Patrick, when you, as a journalist coming into this, when you were having to analyze this and put it together, could you sort of pinpoint a place where the chaos begins and the egos start to get out of control in the story of the resurgence of Disney animation?
It was slow. I think when Peter talked to me about this, he gave me two goals. He said, make it dramatic and make it emotional. And right away, I discovered that the heart of the movie, the emotional heart of the movie, would be Howard Ashman, this extraordinarily talented person who played a central role in the Renaissance, who was the lyricist and writer of Beauty and the Beast and of Little Mermaid.
He wasn't the writer per se; he was the storyteller.
Right.
Yeah. Of both Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast,
and
worked
Aladdin.
on Aladdin as well. And of course, there's this poignant premature death that he had of an HIV-related illness. Yeah. But he is the emotional heart, the true sort of artistic spirit that informed this period in many ways. And it's a very exciting thing to watch. The drama, of course, came with very powerful, very rich, very talented, very complicated people who basically made me think that no matter how much power, no matter how much money you have, we're all still 5 years old in the sandbox.
That's right. One of the biggest corporations in the world run by 5-year-olds. There you go.
And what do 5-year-olds do? I mean,
well, you grab my pail and I'm going to hit you with my shovel. Or I want that. No, I have that. And it's really sort of fascinating, and that this sort of came up. One success, and Peter can speak to this, once the media attention, because it was totally ignored, I think, right?
Correct. Yeah. For the first 7 years, no one cared.
Because you were all the kings of Hollywood. You were making great movies.
No. Animation is the backwater. No one cared.
So wait, nobody cared about what?
The success, making the movies. It
really,
wasn't
they didn't
Hollywood.
care. Beauty and the Beast, all that, really. Huh?
It was only after Beauty and the Beast that Hollywood said, "Wait a second, what's going on here?"
Disney's coming back. Yeah.
Well, not even that. But if you look at this year, 20 animated movies were considered for the Best Animated Picture category this year for the Academy Award. Right. In 1994, there wasn't a category,
Right.
and only one movie would have qualified.
What was that movie?
It would be Lion King at that time, right?
Right.
It was only after this period of time that everybody go, oh my God, let's get into the business. For this 10-year period of time, Disney basically had a creative and financial monopoly on the animated business.
Peter, when you were in the thick of it as the head of the animation, and these egos are colliding and all this stuff is going on as you show in the movie, how do you, as a corporate player, how do you navigate that? How did you navigate? How did you survive?
You know, I think the first thing you do is you always focus on the work. You have to keep your eye on making sure the work has excellence, and all the fights, by and large, are over trying to make the work better. And as long as you focus on that, and I had two bosses. I reported both to Jeffrey Katzenberg and to Roy Disney. And therefore my skill was being able to navigate between these two very interesting, powerful, fantastically creative men.
And Roy Disney is the nephew of Walt.
Correct.
Who just died, Roy Disney.
He just died in December.
And what was Roy's responsibility to the company?
Well, Roy led the takeover in 1984. He became the head of animation, the titular head of animation when they took it over. Said, this is mine. I'm going to be in charge of this. He was the vice chairman of the board. He was Disney. He was the named person on the board. He was tremendously smart. He wrote terrific notes. He was there with us in both physically and basically a much more moral center for the company. I
So in terms of, just for people who haven't seen your film, the power split between Eisner, Katzenberg, and Disney, how did the power split?
Well, Michael actually ran the entire company. The company's very multifaceted. Jeffrey ran the studio, which is the filmmaking branch of the company. The company is the parks and consumer products and ABC and ESPN. And Jeffrey ran the studio, which is filmmaking, both live action and animation.
And you?
And I ran animation for Jeffrey. And Roy sort of crossed all these boundaries and was the spirit of the entire place.
And you, when you're in the thick of all this, does there ever come a point where you have to sort of pick a side in some of these battles and cast your lot with one or the other?
You know, you can't. Right? I think that was the job to do, which was to try and figure out how to make the movies great and to harness the power of both these gentlemen and all these people to get these movies out into the public.
It's one of the interesting decisions you made about the movie is to only show footage of the period. You haven't gone back to interview people today. You've got fabulous archival footage of people in the animation department, Michael Eisner doing introductions to the movies at the time. Why did you make that decision, Patrick, not to do talking heads and people reflecting back on things?
That was not my decision. That was Don, I believe.
Don,
and
the
it was
director.
And I think Peter had also said from the beginning, no old men talking.
No old guys reminiscing.
Right.
It was really Don's idea, which was, can we transport you back into the room?
And make you make you feel that you're part of what's going on.
You do feel like
there.
you're in that place.
So that's the idea. So the minute you do a talking head, which is an observational documentary, you go, oh, we're back in the present day.
Right.
The idea was to do current interviews, voiceover,
Right.
and have archival footage so we transport you back
Into the time.
to that time. Big hair, big eyeglasses, and big shoulders.
All right, so give us a sense. What was it like to go to work at Disney Animation back in 1987, 88?
What was it like?
It seemed to me that it looks from the outside, this is an outsider's point of view, a hell of a lot of fun. But I got the sense in talking to practically 100 people, many who worked at that time, it was exciting, it was thrilling, and it was a pain in the neck. People really, really worked intensely hard. He was a real SOB.
Seriously, that is so untrue.
He was a real SOB. The artists started out hating him and grew to love and respect him, actually.
Why did they hate him?
That was the arc.
Because I came in to do change. I came in as the first outsider ever to run this company and run the animation company. I didn't draw. They didn't trust anybody. They had just produced The Black Cauldron, which, as I say in the movie, I had no fears because I couldn't do any worse than The Black Cauldron, no matter what I did badly.
Yeah.
And you're coming into a place where people say to you, you're going to ruin Walt Disney's legacy. And you go, oh my. And then you realize there is no legacy left. There's a legacy of 50 years ago.
Right.
But today's legacy is like there's nothing. So make some changes, and change is hard.
And what sort of changes did you make that upset them initially?
And
I mean, you made them work harder or draw better?
Work harder, draw better,
Yeah.
self-critique, bring in outsiders, pick teams, have opinions, actually become artistic players, as opposed to just, as Susan said, grunts. We brought a theater discipline to it.
Yeah,
that's a key.
That's the key.
All right, and the key to that is Howard Ashman.
Absolutely.
So give us a little bit of background on Howard Ashman. And
Well, that was...
Who is Howard?
Howard obviously was Alan Menken's longtime writing partner. They had had some successes off-Broadway, most notably with Little Shop of Horrors. Peter, interestingly enough, was stage manager, company manager
on Little
company
Shop.
manager
so
on
that
Little
was
Shop of Horrors, and Jeffrey Katzenberg's best friend David Geffen also knew them because he produced Little Shop of Horrors.
Right.
So when this sort of critical mass came, and Peter came in with this theatrical discipline, the light bulb went off. How about bringing Howard and Alan out to become a part of this? Howard had just had a big disappointment with Smile.
Yeah, failed musical with Marvin Hamlish.
With Marvin Hamlish. Right. And I think he was really ready for a change. And as he says in the documentary, I really jumped on this. And I thought animation is the place where I can really bring my theatrical talents to be exploited and to really explore it. And boy, did they ever. I think it was the perfect match. It's a perfect storm.
Howard was an extraordinary artist. And he found himself a very fertile ground to do exactly what he wanted to do. And he had complete control. And I think that's the interesting thing about artists in the theater. They would like to have more control.
Right.
And Howard finally had a place. He could write the songs, he could do the lyrics, he could tell Mr. Menken, brilliant Mr. Menken, Alan Menken, what to write. And he could say, I want it to look this way. So he's responsible for the design of Ursula. He, as we say in the documentary, made the crab Rastafarian, Jamaican.
Right.
The directors are thinking, he'll be one of those old, white, crusty guys that's been in one of our movies forever. And then Howard says, make him Jamaican.
Yeah.
What?
And Howard wasn't, I mean, we tend to idolize him now. He could be a very difficult person. And I remember talking to Alan Menken about him. And Alan said to me, he said that, Howard was difficult. He was a self-flagellating artist. And the problem with working with self-flagellating artists is that sometimes they miss and hit you.
That's good.
that was true, I think, of this period, all the way around. Because a lot of times artists would say to me, Peter Schneider would come in at 2 o'clock in the morning and saying, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? And you think, I don't need this kind of pressure. But that was the kind of pressure that these artists were under.
But part of what we wanted to do was capture the joy. There is so much joy in this period of time. I mean, you have no idea. Even today, artists look back and say, as much as difficult as it was, how long I worked, it was the happiest, most productive days of my life.
Can you give me an example when you're working on, let's say, Beauty and the Beast or The Little Mermaid, and you are, trying to get that story moment right, that song right, that character right, the drafts. Can you give me an example of when suddenly you all realize that's it, that's the look, that's the feel?
Let me give you The Lion King. Okay. Lion King, Elton John wrote the song Circle of Life. And we could not make it work. It was just a pop song that in the demo just had no feel. Was it African? We're in Africa, Susan, for pity's sake.
Yeah.
How do you do this? And we went to a guy called Hans Zimmer, who very famous scorer, composer. He had written an album called Power of One. Right. And he said, I can play with this. And walking by his studio one day was Lebo M, this extraordinary singer from South Africa. And he said, Lebo, give me a call. And Lebo went, right? That opening call of the Lion King. And Hans did his little thing, and we all went and heard it. And the minute he played for us what it was, we all went, oh my God, that's it. And within a week, the entire sequence had been boarded and finished.
Wow. Interesting.
And
that's the kind of exciting creative breakthrough you live for.
Correct. You live for that moment Hans Zimmer and Lebo M come in and do something and turn something that you can't quite see into a vehicle to carry the story.
So then do you go and play it for the 200 to 2,000 artists and say, okay, everybody, this is it, get going?
Well, they had been working on it, and Chris Sanders and the directors took this track and took all the drawings they've been doing for 2 years, just lined them all up, shot the drawings, put it on videotape, and said, that's our opening sequence, and it didn't change.
The fascinating thing about it is that you never know, because when you're in the creative act, you never know what's going to click and what's not. So that there is a moment in the film where Jeffrey Katzenberg is at a preview of Little Mermaid, and the kids are restless because they've had too much sugar or something during part of your world, and he tells the guys, you got to cut part of your world, and you got to cut it.
Famous
it's
story.
slowing down the movie. You got to cut it, and they fight and they fight and they fight, and I think it was finally Glenn Keane.
Who was Glenn Keane?
Glenn Keane is a top animator, top artist, and again, speaking to the inspiration, Susan, that you brought up, is that after Glenn Keane usually drew monsters or the tough guys or the bad guys. When he heard Jodie Benson's demo of Part of Your World, he went to the directors and the producers of Little Mermaid and said, I've got to draw Ariel. I've got to draw Ariel.
And they say...
Because I can feel it in my heart.
And they say, but can you really draw pretty girls? You're not known for drawing pretty girls.
This is old Disney thinking, though. You're slotted into doing the thing
Correct.
you've done for years and
Correct.
years. And your job was
just
to...
break it all up.
Try it all.
Try it all up.
If you want to draw a pretty girl, give it a shot.
But it's very theatrical. I mean, I think why we're on Theater Talk is because it has so many theater influences.
Well, we should say that when you were really crowned, I felt, was with Beauty and the Beast, when Frank Rich wrote in the New York Times, the best Broadway musical this season is Beauty and the Beast. And that really affirmed everything that you were doing.
Correct.
Do you remember reading that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and the genesis of that is then, of course, 4 years later, it's on Broadway.
Yeah.
And it's been running for 13 years.
So Frank wrote that about the film.
He wrote that about the movie. That's right. He said the best Broadway musical is Beauty and the Beast.
This season is Beauty and the Beast.
The animated film.
It's the animated film.
Was it in your mind, because then you went on with Tom Schumacher to run the Disney theatrical and produce Beauty and the Beast, Lion King.
Lion King and Aida.
And Aida. Was it in your mind when you were in the animation department that one day these shows should be on Broadway?
Never.
Never.
Never. It was never. It never a thought that that's what we should do with them. It was really Frank Rich's comment that we all went, "Ooh, what a good idea!"
Well, because again, Michael came from a theatrical background to some extent. So did Jeffrey. They were both from New York. They had been steeped in theater as well. So that mindset was very much a part of it, and I think key to success.
And I also think Joe Roth, who was then the chairman of the studio before I took it over, he was the one who kept saying, "Do Lion King. Do Lion King, for pity's sake." And we all kept saying,
"How?"
we won't do it unless it's a big how. And of course, Julie Taymor is the big how. Right. But it took us a while to get there. But once we did Beauty and the Beast, which was enormously successful. It's just
not critically loved. I mean,
not critically loved, but it ran 13 years on Broadway, and it's now just opened again in a tour, and it's around the world, and it's beloved.
Yeah.
Right. So again, notwithstanding Mr. Riedel's critical successes.
What's the relationship among all of you guys now? Katzenberg, Eisner, you. I mean, the battle's over with. The movie captures the battles, but as you say, people were more willing to talk now. Has the field of battle calmed down, or do they still hate each other?
I think people don't hate each other. I think I'm having dinner with Michael, and we're seeing View from the Bridge next week. So I'm thrilled about that. I still see Michael. I have a great time with Michael. He's a great dinner date. He's
great gossip.
Great guy. It's fantastic to be with. Jeffrey's very successful at DreamWorks. Yeah. He's probably produced more animated movies than any person in the world, ever.
Do he and Michael speak?
You know, do they speak? I think they don't not speak, if that's correct. I think there's no reason why they don't. That there's no real strong animosity anymore. I think part of doing this movie was a reconciliation, very cathartic, in terms of recognizing that together we all did something extraordinary for 10 years, and finally acknowledging the fact that we did it, as opposed to fighting about it.
And they were sort of talking through us, right? I mean, when I was talking to Michael Eisner, he'd want to know, well, what did Jeffrey say?
5-year-olds in this.
It's true. And Roy, God bless him, who's really sort of the godfather of this whole thing, would just, kind of sit there and just talk.
The real heartbeat of this company was, is, and will always be the film business.
And so they did speak through us in a way, and through this film. I think healing is much too highfalutin a term, but I think they were ready to talk, and I think they wanted this documented.
The movie is very cathartic.
Yeah, it's great fun. It's great fun, and I just love seeing all the clips from the time, because you really feel that you're in the romper room of Disney Animation in 1987. All right, the movie is called Waking Sleeping Beauty, and it opens
March 26th at the landmark Sunshine here in New York.
And then this show goes around the country, so we'll be traveling to.
It's Chicago, in New York, New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And once it does well in those cities, it'll expand out.
Peter Schneider, who was the president of animation at Disney from 1984 to 94, now a producer yourself.
Thank you very much.
On Broadway and in London. And our friend Patrick Pacheco, leaving journalism to make a fortune in documentary filmmaking.
I'm going into a business that will humiliate me.
Completely. And I'll be there to watch it every step of the way.
Thank you.
Peter and Patrick, thanks a lot. It's great
Thank you
fun.
very much.
In almost every musical ever written, there's a place, it's usually about the third song of the evening. Sometimes it's the second, sometimes it's the fourth, but it's quite early. And the leading lady usually sits down on something. Sometimes it's a tree stump in Brigadoon, sometimes it's under the pillars of Covent Garden in My Fair Lady, or it's a trash can in Little Shop of Horrors. But the leading lady sits down on something and sings about what she wants in life. And the audience falls in love with her and then roots for her to get it for the rest of the night.
Look at this stuff, isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete?
I heard Part of Your World, Jodie Benson, singing that, and it just captivated me. I thought, I have to do that. And I went and told those guys, I really want to do Ariel. And they said, well, I don't know. I mean, this is supposed to be a pretty girl. Can you do that?
I said, look, I have to do Ariel. I mean, I can feel it in my heart.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.